My name is Detective Pierce. Private investigator, 20 years in the city that forgets its own stories. I've worked murders, disappearances, insurance scams, the kind of cases that end in empty rooms and unanswered questions. But I've never worked a case that moved backward before. It started on a Thursday night. Rain was already falling when the call came in. A journalist found dead in his apartment. Name, Raymond Kells. Cause of death, unknown. No signs of struggle, no wounds. Just stopped breathing. I arrived at his place around midnight. The building was one of those old stone things, the kind that look like they've been waiting to collapse for a century. 4th floor. One hallway light flickering. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside wasn't the body, it was the ticking. Loud, deliberate, too slow to be a wall clock. It came from the corner of the room, where an old grandfather clock stood facing the window. Its pendulum moved heavy and precise, like it was measuring something more than seconds. Then I realized the hands were moving the wrong way. Backward. Smooth, steady, like it had always done that. The coroner was gone by the time I got there, left the sheet over Kells's body. He'd been slumped near his desk, a glass of whiskey spilled, the papers soaked through. The apartment smelled of ink and rain. On the table lay his typewriter, half a page still rolled in. You can hear them if you listen long enough. They whisper in the gaps between seconds. That was it. No signature, no date. Just those words, and a drop of ink frozen mid-fall. I checked the clock again. It was still ticking in reverse. The time read 11:42, but the report said Kells had been pronounced dead at 11:47. I don't know what made me do it, maybe instinct, but I waited. 5 minutes. Tick by backward tick. At 11:47, the pendulum slowed, then stopped. The silence that followed felt too loud. That's when the phone rang. Not my phone. Kells's. I crossed the room and picked it up. Static. Then, a whisper. My name. Detective Pierce. The voice was slow, like someone speaking underwater. Then it cut out. The line went dead. I looked at the clock. The hands were moving again, backward faster now. 11:46. 11:45. A sharp crack echoed from the wall. The glass face of the clock fractured, but didn't fall. Something shifted behind it, a faint, rhythmic pulse. Like a heartbeat. Like something alive inside the mechanism. I stepped closer. The air around it was colder, and I could hear faint words buried in the ticking, syllables too soft to catch, but they sounded like counting. Counting down. When I blinked, the reflection in the glass changed. For half a second, I saw my own back, me standing in the doorway, watching myself. Then it was gone. I turned off the lamp, stood in the dark, and listened. The city outside sounded wrong, traffic humming too slow, rain falling too steady, like the world had lost its rhythm. When I looked out the window, the street below was empty. No cars, no people. Even the lights in the other buildings had frozen mid-flicker. Then, in the glass reflection, I saw Kells's body sit up. He didn't move fast, just slowly turned his head toward the window. And even from across the room, I could tell he wasn't breathing. His eyes were open, unfocused, and his mouth moved just enough for me to read the words. It's not over yet. You're late. The clock struck once. No chime, just a deep, hollow sound that shook the floorboards. When I turned back to the body, it was still. Unmoving. The silence returned. I left the apartment, locked the door behind me, and didn't realize until I was halfway down the stairs that my watch had stopped at 11:47. The same minute Kells died. The same minute the clock turned back. And when I stepped outside, the rain was falling upward. By morning, the rain was still falling, only now it sounded different. Like it was playing in reverse, droplets sliding up the windows of my office before vanishing into the clouds. I didn't sleep. Didn't even try. The case file sat open on my desk, Kells's name typed in neat black ink at the top. Next to it, a photo from the scene. Only something was wrong. In the picture, the clock wasn't cracked. It was intact. And I swear the hands were pointed at 11:42 again. The same minute I first saw it. I called the coroner's office. They swore they hadn't sent me any photos yet. The report hadn't even been filed. But the photo was there, real as the air in my lungs. I lit a cigarette, stared at it too long, and caught the faintest thing, a shape in the corner of the room that shouldn't have been there. A smudge, a blur, like someone half erased. Kells. Sitting up. Looking at me. I blinked, and it was gone. I went back to the apartment that afternoon. The landlord wasn't happy, but a badge and a name still open doors in this city, even when you're technically retired. The place smelled the same, smoke, ink, rain. Only the clock was missing. Just an empty outline on the wall where it had stood. I checked the floors, the closet, even under the desk. Nothing. But when I opened the kitchen door, I heard it, faint but clear. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound coming slower than the last, like it was sinking into the walls. The sound was coming from the drain in the sink. I bent closer. The metal was freezing to the touch. Somewhere below, water dripped in rhythm. Backward rhythm. I shut my eyes for half a second and saw something behind them. Not an image, but a feeling. Standing in a room that wasn't this one. Same clock. Only this time, it wasn't just counting time, it was showing it. Scenes, moments, people, folding and rewinding like film burning in reverse. Then a voice, faint, but right beside me. Kells. You're already too far in, detective. The whisper was close enough that I felt the air move. I spun around, hand instinctively going for the revolver I stopped carrying years ago. Nothing. Just a cold draft moving through the room. I found Kells's notebook under the bed. Half the pages were blank, the rest written in tight, obsessive strokes. Dates, times, coordinates, all of them crossed out. At the bottom of one page, a line in capital letters. The hands won't stay still. And below it, almost scratched into the paper. If it reaches 12 it all resets. I didn't understand it. But when I looked out the window, the sky was frozen, clouds hanging motionless, mid-turn. And then, like someone pressed rewind, the cigarette I just flicked out the window flew back inside and landed on the table, still burning. The clock was back on the wall. No sound. No pulse. Just waiting. I stepped toward it, and the second hand began to move, backward. Faster this time. The air turned sharp, heavy. Dust lifted off the floor like it was falling upward. Then the world flickered. Once, twice. And I was standing in the same room, only it wasn't empty anymore. The furniture was new. Fresh wallpaper. A calendar on the wall, the date said May 12, 1965. 30 years before Kells was even born. The door opened behind me, and a voice said, "Can I help you?" I turned. A young man stood there, same face as Kells, but younger, sharper. Alive. He looked confused but calm. Like he was expecting me. "Detective Pierce?" he asked. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the clock behind him had just stopped. And the hands were pointed at 11:47 again. When I stepped forward, something cracked beneath my shoe, a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local journalist found dead, Apartment fire under investigation. Only the date was tomorrow. I looked up, Kells was gone. Smoke drifted through the air, slow as syrup, curling toward the clock. Then I heard it, faint, layered whispering coming from inside the walls. Hundreds of voices, all whispering the same word, over and over, out of sync. Back, back, back! And the pendulum began to swing again. I reached for it, and when my fingers brushed the glass, it shattered inward. No sound, no shards, just a rush of cold air that pulled me forward. Everything inverted, light, shadow, sound. And for 1 second I swear I saw every moment I'd ever lived, in reverse. Then black. When I came to, I was sitting at my desk again. Same office. Same case file open. But outside, the rain wasn't falling upward anymore. It wasn't falling at all. The world was still. And on the typewriter in front of me, a fresh page. Words I didn't write. You were here before, detective. Don't let it reach 12. I didn't remember falling asleep. But when I opened my eyes, it was daylight, weak, gray, the kind that never quite feels real. The typewriter was still in front of me. Same sheet of paper. Same words. You were here before, detective. Don't let it reach 12. Only now, below that line, a new one had appeared, ink still wet. You have 3 hours left. I checked the wall clock, 9 a.m. No ticking. No movement. The hands were still, like they were waiting for permission. I poured myself a drink, too early for whiskey, too late for sleep. Something in my gut told me to go back to Kels's place. I didn't argue. Instinct is all that's left when reason starts slipping. The street outside looked like it hadn't aged a day, but it felt wrong. The same faces, the same cars, moving through the same motions, perfectly looped. A man dropped his newspaper. I watched him bend, pick it up, and drop it again. Each time, the page fell exactly the same way. Word for word, frame for frame. I tried to speak to him. He looked at me, or through me, and said, "Almost noon." Then smiled, empty-eyed. I didn't wait to find out what that meant. By the time I reached Kels's building, the world had gone quiet again. No birds. No wind. Just the soft hum of electricity, and that faint, impossible ticking. The kind that doesn't come from one place. It's everywhere, inside the walls, inside your skull. The apartment door was open. I knew I'd locked it. The smell hit me first, burned dust and iron. Inside, the clock was back on the wall. Perfect. Polished. Whole. Its pendulum swung like it never stopped. And beneath it, a shadow. Not cast by the clock, cast from within it. The outline of a man, standing behind the glass, unmoving. I called out. No answer. Then, from behind me, Detective Pierce. It was Kells. Alive again. Same voice, same face, but his eyes, wrong. Too calm. Like they'd seen everything and forgotten what fear meant. You shouldn't be here, he said. Not again. I tried to ask him what this was, what was happening to the time, but he just looked at the clock. It's almost started, he whispered. It always starts at 9. He reached into his coat and handed me a photograph, old, faded. A workshop full of clocks, hundreds of them, every shape and size, walls covered in gears and dials. In the center stood a man with his back turned, wearing a black apron. On the bottom, a note scribbled in the same hand as Kels's notebook. The horologist of St. Verena Street. Kells smiled faintly. He built the first one. The others followed. Before I could ask anything, the air shifted. A sound, deep, metallic, rolled through the room like thunder through water. The clock struck once. then twice. Each chime felt like a heartbeat under my feet. Kels's voice broke. You can't stop it, Pierce. You can only watch it again. He reached for me, but his arm disintegrated, not burned, not torn, unmade. His skin peeled away into dust that floated backward into the air, reforming as a blur of motion. The process reversed itself in real time. He stood whole again, just for a second, eyes wide with terror, and then he was gone. Only the clock remained, ticking backward. I ran. Down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the street, but the city wasn't the same anymore. The light was wrong. Everything had the faint blue tint of an old photograph. People moved slower, their voices delayed by half a second. And every clock I passed, in shop windows, on towers, in cars, every single one was counting down to the same time. 11:47. I followed the photograph's note to St. Verena Street. The address led to a boarded-up shop between a bakery and an abandoned cinema. The sign above the door read faintly, The Horologist, EST 1889. Inside, it smelled of oil and age. Rows of clocks lined the walls, all silent, all frozen at different hours. The floor creaked under my weight. In the center stood a single clock still working, a tall, brass monstrosity with intricate carvings. On its dial, instead of numbers, were words. Beginning, half, end, return. I watched the hands move backward from half, toward beginning. And when they crossed the mark, the door slammed shut behind me. The lights dimmed. Every clock in the room started ticking. Backward. And in the flicker between seconds I saw them, shapes standing in the reflection of each glass face. People I'd known. People I'd lost. All staring at me with the same expression, regret. A low voice spoke from behind the brass clock. You've heard the song, haven't you, detective? The rhythm beneath the city? I stepped closer. The figure that emerged wasn't Kells. It was older, taller, a man in a black apron, skin like paper, eyes hollow but shining. The horologist. Time doesn't move forward here, he said. It folds. It corrects itself. He placed a hand on the brass clock. Every choice you make, every step you take, it rewinds again and again until it's perfect. I asked him, perfect for who? He smiled. For the clock, of course. The ticking grew louder, deeper. And when he turned the key in the clock's side, the world blinked again. I was back in Kels's apartment. The body on the floor. The rain outside. The clock on the wall. 11:42. And from the hallway, a knock at the door. My own voice. Detective Pierce. Open up. The knock at the door echoed like thunder underwater. My own voice, low, tired, certain, called from the other side. Detective Pierce. Open up. I didn't move. Couldn't. The air was thick, the kind that presses on your lungs like a hand. The clock ticked softly in the corner, each backward motion like the pulse of something enormous and patient. I stepped closer to the door and placed my palm against the wood. The surface was cold, colder than it should have been. Then the handle turned. Slowly. Deliberate. But the door didn't open. Instead, the world around me shivered. Not a sound, not a movement, a shudder, like reality itself exhaled. The rain outside froze mid-drop. My breath hung in front of me like smoke in still air. And then I heard it again, my voice. Closer this time, right in my ear. You're late again, Pierce. I spun around. No one there. But on the wall opposite the clock, a shadow stretched long and warped, standing where I wasn't. It moved when I didn't. Tilted its head when I froze. And as I watched, it raised a hand toward the clock. The clock's hand stopped. A ringing sound filled the room, a long, endless note that didn't seem to fade. And in that stillness, I remembered something. Something I shouldn't. Another room. Another time. A brass clock. The horologist turning the key. And me, standing beside him. Smiling. I left the apartment without thinking. The stairwell was empty, dust floating backward through the shafts of light. Outside, the city was washed pale, buildings half erased, streets leading nowhere. People walked like reflections, each footstep a fraction behind their own shadow. I passed the newspaper stand. Every headline was the same. Time repeats. Time repeats. Time repeats. The vendor looked up, his face blurring at the edges like wet paint. "You can't leave before 12, he said. I kept walking. By the time I reached my office, the light had turned the color of old film. Everything was tinted amber and blue, frozen in a false twilight that never ended. The air smelled faintly of brass and dust, the same scent as the horologist's workshop. On my desk, the typewriter was already waiting. Another page rolled in. Words forming by themselves, letter by letter, in neat rhythm. "You cannot end what you were built to begin." My hands trembled. I ripped the page out, threw it across the room. It landed near the window, where another page already lay, identical. Same words. Same smudges. Like I'd already done this. And maybe I had. I poured another drink and watched the liquid swirl in reverse. Ice melting back into cubes, droplets sliding upward along the glass. When I blinked, I wasn't in my office anymore. The light changed. The smell changed. I was back in the horologist's workshop. He stood at the center again, but now there were others, silhouettes gathered around him, each holding a clock. All ticking backward in perfect sync. Their faces were covered, features blurred like overexposed photographs. The horologist looked up. "You've come home, detective." I stepped forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. "What am I?" I asked. He smiled, that slow, patient smile that doesn't comfort, only confirms. "You're the counterweight. The loop needs balance. You move forward so time can fall back." He gestured to the brass clock behind him, the one I'd seen before. Only now it had another dial, smaller, inset into the base, with one word etched across it. Pierce. The hand on that dial was moving backward too. Counting down. "When you reach 12, the horologist said, the cycle renews. The world forgets. The city resets. And you begin again, just as before." I wanted to argue. To say I was more than that. But somewhere deep inside, I already knew the truth. I'd been here before. I'd said these words before. And I'd failed every time. "Why me?" I whispered. The horologist looked at me as if the question itself was the problem. "Because you remember," he said softly. "And the clock needs someone who believes in the lie of time." The ticking grew louder, deeper, now not just sound, but pressure, pushing into my ribs, behind my eyes, through my teeth. The other figures began to dissolve into dust, their clocks falling silent one by one. Only mine remained. The brass clock, the hand moving toward 12. I turned, ran for the door, but it wasn't there anymore. Just the reflection of a door in polished brass. I reached for it, and the surface rippled like water. Suddenly I was outside again. Street lamps flickering. Rain still frozen in the air. And in every reflection, windows, puddles, glass, I saw myself, over and over. Not reflections, not copies, versions. Each one older, younger, different. Each one mouthing the same words silently. "Don't let it reach 12. I looked up. The clock tower at the center of the city, one I'd never noticed before, was glowing faint blue. Its hands spinning backward faster and faster. And from somewhere deep below the streets, I heard the horologist's voice again. You have to choose, detective. Stop the clock, or become it. I took one step forward, and the world shifted. Buildings stretched, glass bending like it was soft. The sky folded inward. And for one terrible instant, I could see the mechanism beneath everything. Massive gears turning in silence, veins of light connecting every clock, every shadow, every heartbeat. And in the center, one empty space, the missing gear. The place where I was meant to fit. The city's heartbeat quickened. The tower began to hum. 11:46. I ran. No plan, no reason, just raw panic. Every window I passed showed another version of me, running the other way. Some already gone. Some still starting. And somewhere behind me, the horologist whispered. Almost noon. The city was moving. Not the people, they were frozen mid-step, but the streets themselves. Buildings shifted like pieces on a board, aligning toward the clock tower in the center. Every shadow pointed the same direction. Every reflection showed the same image, the tower's face glowing pale blue against the black sky. I could hear it now, under the pavement, under the bones of the city. A low mechanical pulse, steady and patient. Like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. 11:46. The horologist's voice still lingered somewhere behind me, low, almost kind. Almost noon, detective. The hour of correction. I didn't look back. The rain had started again, falling the wrong way, upward into the clouds. Every drop passed through me cold and soundless. I knew where I was going. The tower. The center. The beginning. When I reached it, the street opened into a courtyard paved with black stone. The air shimmered, dense and electric, and the light bent around the tower's base like water around a drain. The door stood open. Waiting. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil and old metal. Spirals of machinery stretched upward into darkness, gears the size of buildings, turning slow and deliberate. Each one carried a faint shimmer of light, as if they remembered every motion they'd ever made. The stairs wound up through the machinery, narrow and endless. I climbed without counting, because numbers didn't mean anything anymore. Sometimes I passed faces in the walls, blurred, unfinished, whispering my name as I went by. Sometimes I heard the ticking stop. Sometimes it started again. At the top, the chamber was empty. Circular, silent, and cold. In the center stood the master clock, taller than any man, made of brass and glass, its heart glowing faint blue. The hands spun backward in short, frantic bursts, fighting against something unseen. And on the floor before it, half buried in dust, a revolver. My revolver. The one I stopped carrying years ago. I picked it up. It was warm. Then I saw the horologist, standing behind the clock. He looked almost human this time, skin smooth, eyes tired. For the first time, he sounded gentle. You made it again, Nathaniel. He said my name like he'd known it longer than I had. You don't have to fight it. You've done enough. The clock will take it from here. I raised the gun, though I already knew it wouldn't matter. What happens if I let it reach 12? He smiled sadly. Then everything begins again. The city is born anew. You return to your desk. You take the case. You find the body. You wake to the ticking. I asked what would happen if I stopped it. The horologist's eyes flicked to the clock face. The second hand trembled. Then nothing, he said. No beginning. No end. No time left to remember you at all. 11 hours 46 minutes and 30 seconds. The ticking filled the chamber. each sound heavier, deeper. The air shook with it. The tower's gears ground slower, resisting their own motion. "You're the counterweight," he said again. "You hold the loop together. If you stop, it stops. All of it." I thought about the case files in my drawer, the rain on the office window, the cigarette smoke curling backward through the air. I thought about how every moment I'd lived might have already been lived 1,000 times before. Maybe that's all any of this was. A heartbeat in the chest of a dying clock. 11:47. The tower trembled. Cracks raced across the brass face, light leaking through them like blood through glass. The horologist stepped back. "It's too late now," he whispered. "You waited too long." The gun felt heavier. My hand steadier. "Then maybe I'm right on time," I said. I fired once. The bullet shattered the center of the clock face. No explosion. No sound. Just silence, pure and absolute, as the gears froze mid-turn. The blue light flared, then folded inward. The world pulled tight, like fabric shrinking to a single point. And everything began to unwind. The tower melted into white. The city fell away, its streets folding like paper, its voices dissolving into static. The horologist smiled one last time, his form breaking apart into dust and light. "At last," he said. A pause. And then even he was gone. I opened my eyes. I was sitting at my desk. The office was quiet. The clock on the wall was gone. No ticking. No rain. Outside the window, the city was still. Not frozen, empty. The skyline faded into white mist, and the air carried no echo. On the desk, one object remained. A small brass gear, perfectly still, cold as stone. When I picked it up, I saw my own reflection, and behind it, nothing at all. I waited for the ticking to start again. It didn't. For the first time in longer than I could remember, time wasn't moving. Not forward. Not backward. Just gone. I leaned back in the chair, stared into the fog outside, and felt something like peace. The kind that only comes when there's nothing left to lose, and nothing left to start again. Maybe the horologist was right. Maybe I'd always been part of the mechanism. But now the mechanism was quiet. And in that silence I realized. This was what freedom sounded like.